Hi, I'm Sierra. I'm coming to you from Boomerang Bags Boston headquarters, which is also my sewing and making studio and my own house. We came together many years ago to support the argument that low-income families and seniors would be negatively affected by passing a bag ban in Boston. So we were trying to demonstrate that community could come together and support those in need, and that at the same time create environmental policies that would reflect how we want to continue to live with a reducing of single-use plastics. So we got together and as well that the bag ban was passed a few years back. And in the last few days, I joked a few weeks ago to my family I should make our own masks, and they laughed at me. And now here we are a few days into a lot of people making masks, which is amazing. Sewing is a skill that can be so broadly used. So I'm very, very excited to be able to use this skill of compassion and sewing and bringing it together to those in need. So after doing a bunch of research, what I wanted to take the time to do was find materials. I had been hearing about flannel being used on the inside because it was against people's faces, and I felt like that seemed like a good resolution, as well as a little bit thicker material to some of the thinner cottons. So you're supposed to use a 100% or a cotton blend, ideally 100% cotton, and you shouldn't really see the light as much as you do here when you hold it up. So with some of my thinner cottons especially, I really like the fact that I'm using the flannel to really kind of create a buffer, and also that it's soft against the face. So a little bit thicker, soft against the face. But with this type of mask, one of the greatest advantages of using this mask, and it's basically a spin-off of the first video that was going around and widely used, is one, it's a very, very simple construction. It starts with 2 rectangles and 2 elastics, both 7 inches. And with Boomerang bags, really any amount of waste, textile waste that we don't use in the construction of bags, we've been taking to the Goodwill or Morgan's Memorial for Textile Recycling. And they're really good about things like that, taking back what we don't need. Not all resellers like Savers do that, but many of them do. So I just pile up scraps like this in a big bag, and just keep piling them on until I get a full bag, and then bring them so nothing is wasted. So one of the things with the profile masks that I found that in cutting any other shape other than this is really allowing for a lot bigger waste of textile resources. So for me, I was looking for something that was very, very simple that anyone could do, including one of my Girl Scouts, and had the least amount of waste with materials, and really anybody could do. Now, the part that I changed from that first tutorial that was going around produced by a hospital was the pocket. So there was discussion about these pockets having some type of filter that could go in some of the pockets. Now, we don't know exactly where all of these masks will land, and a lot of the hospitals that are taking them are asking for very specific construction. So this is more of a general use, unless the group that you're using has other types of guidelines or rules. So in creating a mask, basically it's 2 pieces of fabric. They should be either 2 different colors, or like I said, a flannel and your other type of cotton. The reason for that is that if it's taken off, even temporarily, that it's a very easy indicator of what's the inside of the mask, what's the outside of the mask. What I've done to create sort of a template for myself, even though I do have acrylic plexi and I have a rotary cutter, I do still like to use something like this because it kind of gives a quick guide, especially using under my plexi. So I have my 2 pieces. You can use scissors, you can use a rotary cutter, whatever you have at home is completely fine. We're going to take this next. The first step after cutting is ironing. So I'm just here ironing my fabric just to have it kind of, again, after it's been cut down, it's a little bit more, it's easier to wrangle the fabric. You can see there's a little bit misalignment, so I'm just going to fix that real quick. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take 1/2 inch from the top. Now, this is kind of really could go either way. Some of the cotton fabrics that you're going to use, they're going to have really an outer side that's prettier on the outside or better on the outer side, and then maybe a duller pattern on the inside. This one is kind of a little bit equal on both, but ideally you want the fabric that you want to see on the outside facing your flannel. So I just did a 1/2 inch iron down here. You're going to take the same with your flannel, ironing it along there. Again, just give it all a good press. The other great thing about flannel, or even using cotton with cotton, is that it kind of creates this Velcro effect where they're not really sliding off each other as polyester does. So this is actually quite a pleasure to work with. All right, the next step is going to be doing a straight stitch on both the cotton and the flannel, or both cotton. It's just a 1 straight stitch that goes all the way down. It's about 1/4 to about 1/4 inch. You want to start not exactly especially when it's thin fabric like this. You don't want to start at the very, very edge. So you don't have to stop stitch this because it's kind of going to be buried in. You just don't want the fabric to grab where the bottom is. Straight as you can go. Gonna flip this around, and really you can completely separate the fabric, but by doing this I'm kind of cutting out a step of having to realign it. So one other thing that I've done on my card, not just put the measurements here and here, a 9 by 7, but another thing I've done is kind of given a visual guidance for where I'm going to put pins, and those pins are going to protect the opening so I don't sew through it. So these pins right here, I'm putting 1/3 of the way down, so that's 1/3 because it's 9 inches across, and so it's every 3 inches, and that would be 2 here. And the concept, what we're going to do is that we're going to start right on one side. This is my little bird here. So we're going to start at the bird. We're going to go do a straight stitch down here. We're going to, in the inside, attach a piece of elastic. The piece of elastic is going to, you have to make sure that it doesn't get too close to the edge, otherwise you sew it at a funny angle. You'll want to sew it at that corner here. Mind you, this fabric will be down, so we sew here, we sew down along here. Then we have to take the elastic around and kind of pull it so it's at the smiley face kind of shape right here. You sew it into that corner, underneath here, 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 and then you're done. Make sure here and here that you're doing a stop stitch, and at pivot points that your needle is down before you pivot. It makes it a lot easier and cleaner. I'm going to carefully review with everyone on a slower scale just this corner because it's the same on the other side. So here I am at my bird, my foot is down. I like to use white thread so it doesn't show up so much on the flannel. So about 3 or 4 stitches forward, 3, 4 stitches back, and about 1 inch before we get to this corner, just to give myself a little bit of extra room, I'm going to fold this back here. Put this in the corner. It's almost better if you have it out a little bit like this. Okay, there. And I like to go over it a few times, just in that spot. Back out a little bit, just so you have about a 1/2 inch. That's maybe one too many stitches. So before I pivot, I'm going to make sure my needle is down. Lift your foot up, swing it around. Make sure that the elastic is not too close to the edge, otherwise you will stitch it in the wrong place. Foot down. So again, about 1 inch, a little bit more before you hit the end. You can put your foot up just to give yourself a little bit more room. I'm using a flat elastic, and this is 1/8 inch, which I really, really like because it is quite comfortable on the ears. You're gonna pull this around. You'll start to see that it might kind of tug on the other end up. That is okay. You just don't want it to kind of to get stuck or sewn before its corner. So again, we're bringing it back to this angle going inward. Take this over here, put everything back. Okay, great. So we're gonna pivot, and we're gonna do the same thing all the way around, and the same type of thing with the elastics. After you've sewn around each side, we started on one, we went around, and again, the elastics are right here. You can feel them. So again, just making sure that they're not caught here in your seam. And after you do one of these, you're gonna notice that you get really comfortable because you know what to expect, and it will be almost body memory after you've done a few of them. They'll really get into a rhythm. So one of the things that I like to do is cut the corners off, because when they're turned inside out, it gives a little less bulk with that. The other thing that I like to do is once you turn it inside out, or you're putting, so here's my pocket, that you're turning it this way to really press those corners out and kind of get the most bang for your buck on the fabric and coverage and all of the elements that this pattern gives you. One of the things that I like to do is use the end of a paintbrush or a knitting needle without poking too hard, because you don't want to poke a hole through it, although it will, doing this will show you how strong your seams are. And on each of the corners, you're kind of just poking, using the stick as an extension of your hand or your finger, really getting those corners out. So this won't really lay flat right now because it's quite a little bit smaller than the elastic is, and the elastic there is holding it down. So another thing I'm going to do before I sew it is I'm going to just hit it with the iron one more time to make it flat. All right, so we have our fabric here. It's flat, it's ironed. The next step of it is creating these pleats. That's the part that allows really this to hug around your face. Like I said, the one that is 7 inches instead of 8 inches really just goes onto the underside of your chin. Again, still with the pocket. This one is going to go really much further underneath your chin, really hugging the underside of it. So one thing, whether it's either size 7 or 8 inches that you use, really in the end, you want this portion to be about 2 inches and maybe 2 and 1/4 or so. One of the first samples that I made, I did not create enough pleating to my edges, and what had happened is that it really doesn't allow the elastic to be able to do its job. So the more pleating, the better, I would say. And to do that, we are going to go around all of the edges one more time, except for where our pocket is. But really, I feel very comfortable just creating the pleats as I go, making sure that if you go this way with the pleats, you want to do the same direction on the other side. But I'm not going to pleat them yet. If you feel like you have to pin your pleats, especially to begin because you don't feel comfortable, then you can do that too. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing again, starting on that where my bird was, on my bird pin. I'm going to start on this side, go around, and then start pleating as I go. One thing that you want to do, just to be kind to your machine, is that you don't want to have your layers overlap so much. You kind of want them to be right next to each other, especially if you're using flannel, because the thickness of it isn't as kind to, especially if your needle's not great or your machine's not acting a little funky or something. You want at least 3 pleats, and I would say ideally you're starting them the closest to the top as possible, because then it allows you bigger pleats and not to get so scrunched and do towards the bottom. So I like to hold my pleats or do that as I go. Like I said, we're going to go to the machine next. This is my starting point right here. Again, here's my pocket for any type of filter. We don't want to make it smaller than it already is. So we're going to start right at that point, about 1/2 inch down. This really just reinforces, and then as well is the stitch that holds those pleats. So foot down, do a stop stitch, a few forward, a few back. Needle down to make that nice pivot. Again, this is where, especially the type of machine you have, give yourself a little bit of extra room. I could have gone maybe even a little bit more there. You want your pleats to be big, but not too wide. This one might struggle a little bit here. The other thing is going over many different thicknesses of fabric. Another way to get over that is you can use the dial on the side of your machine, and you can also just kind of go slow because it can kind of get, the bobbin especially can really get bound at the bottom. So going nice and slow, it should go through it. When you get to the bottom, we're going to go back around it one more time, but when you get to the bottom, go one more stitch. Okay, needle in to pivot, and then we're going to go around to the edge just like we did. Stop there, and remember, we want to create the same type of gather direction as the one that we did on the other side, whichever direction you choose. Okay, my not so delicate fingers. Okay, I'll make a bigger one here. Okay, foot down. Remember not to sew over your fingers, but you know, doing something like this, you have to be a little aggressive. So one thing I just had to take my seam ripper out was that my elastic was tucked under. It didn't get sewn through, but it did get trapped on the wrong side. So going back up to that corner, I'm gonna do a few back stitch. Okay, this is our final piece. Really, again, make sure your needle's down. Find out, kind of give yourself that marker of where you should be. Making sure you're also not going through all of the pleats here. Now that I've trimmed all my pieces, I have my mask, which is great. I'd say one side is a little more successful is keeping to that 2-inch rule that I like, but I think overall it's pretty good. One thing, just to recap, the reason why I created this design, and this might exist out there, I really liked the original tutorial based on the simplicity of construction, but then also the using least amount of waste. A lot of the other masks that are more shaped to your face, while incredibly beautiful in construction, that they allow, there's a lot more elements and pieces to fabricate it, creating more textile waste. So I wanted to create something very, very simple, especially within our group. We have a lot of ages ranging from kids to adults, from novices to experts. So I wanted to create something, especially as I've been getting asked a lot in the last few days, what we're going to do. So flannel, if you have it on the inside, that's great. If not, do something with cotton. Make sure that you can't see through it too much. Do know that these, to be sanitized, they might be done with bleach, so don't choose something that maybe is too color saturated. It will, obviously getting this bleached is gonna have an entirely different effect. It already has some batiking on it. This might get a little saturated and discolored, it's hard to know. They are used for safety, although they're made with incredible, beautiful fabrics that I've been seeing people use out there. So for this type of construction and the ease of creating it with the addition of the pocket for any type of filter, I think this is what I encourage people to make. So that's the end of our tutorial from Boomerang Bags Boston headquarters. I hope this encourages you to make something that's easy with something that you already have in the house, or if you have questions about the construction, the making, the materials, let me know. And I want to thank Gather Here, Stitch House, and so many of the other places that are drop-off locations. I want everyone to make sure that they're washing their hands before they start making and working with their machines. Wiping down your machines in your area is also a good idea. Make sure that you wash your hands. Obviously, everyone's hands are quite dry and chapped at this point. My children are constantly criticizing me for it.